The colony ship Prometheus Dawn had been humanity's last hope, a vessel carrying 10,000 souls fleeing a dying Earth. When it crash-landed on Drakkar Prime, the survivors expected death. Instead, they found dragons. Not the mythical beasts of Earth's folklore, but something far more terrifying. Sentient reptilian beings the size of cargo haulers, with scales that shimmered like molten metal and eyes that burned with ancient intelligence. The dragons, or the Drakkari as they called themselves, had watched the human ship fall from the sky like a dying star, carving a scar across their sacred hunting grounds. The first contact had been tense. The Drakkari were apex predators, their civilization built on strength, honor, and the sacred bond between warrior and territory. Humans were fragile, weak, their soft skin unable to withstand even the gentlest brush of Drakkari claws. Yet somehow, an uneasy peace had formed. The dragons allowed the humans to settle in the crash zone, provided they never ventured beyond the marked boundaries. For 3 years it worked. Lena Gray was 7 years old when everything changed. She had been born on the Prometheus Dawn, spent her first 4 years in cryosleep, and knew no other home than the prefabricated shelters of New Haven Colony. Her world was small but filled with wonder, the purple skies of Drakkar Prime, the bioluminescent flowers that bloomed at night, and her most prized possession, a small mechanical rabbit her mother had built from salvaged ship parts. The rabbit didn't do much. It hopped when you wound its spring, its ears twitched, and the tiny recording of her father's voice lost in the crash played when you pressed its nose. "I love you, little star," it would say. That rabbit was all Lena had left of him. Sarah Gray, Lena's mother, worked in the colony's tech division, repairing equipment and trying to reverse engineer their damaged quantum communicator. She was brilliant, determined, and fiercely protective of her daughter. But even brilliance couldn't protect against human nature's darker impulses. The Broker's gang had formed 6 months after landing, a group of opportunists led by Marcus Venn, who believed survival meant taking what you needed, regardless of who it hurt. They controlled the black market, hoarded supplies, and operated beyond the Colony Council's authority. Venn had his eyes on the quantum communicator components Sarah was working with. Those parts could be sold, traded, or used for leverage with the Drakkari, who had shown interest in human technology. When Sarah refused to hand over her work, Venn's enforcers came at night. Lena watched from beneath her bed as 3 men burst into their shelter. She heard her mother's protests, the sound of equipment being smashed, and then the sickening crack of a fist against flesh. Sarah crumpled to the floor, blood streaming from her nose. "Please," Sarah gasped, "not in front of my daughter." One of the men noticed the mechanical rabbit on Lena's shelf. He grabbed it, laughing. "What's this? Looks valuable." "No!" Lena screamed, rushing from her hiding place. "That's mine! Give it back!" The man's backhand sent her sprawling. Pain exploded across her face and she tasted blood. Through blurry tears, she watched them drag her unconscious mother out, the rabbit clutched in the thief's grimy hand. Lena ran. She didn't think about the boundaries or the warnings. She just ran, tears streaming, legs pumping, through the colony gates and into the forbidden zone, the vast expanse of obsidian cliffs and thermal vents where the Drakkari made their roosts. Her screams echoed across the valley. "They hurt my mom! They took my toy! Somebody help!" The response was immediate. Azure, wing commander of the Northern Roost, was the first to arrive. He descended from his perch like thunder made flesh, his crimson scales gleaming in Drakkar Prime's triple moonlight. At 50 feet from snout to tail, he was a living weapon capable of incinerating entire battalions with his plasma breath. He landed before the tiny human child with earth-shaking force, expecting fear. Instead, Lena looked up at him with tear-filled eyes and hiccuped, "Please, Dot." "They hurt my mom." Azure tilted his massive head, examining this impossibly small creature. In 3 years of coexistence, no human had dared enter Drakkari territory. Yet here stood a hatchling, for that's what she clearly was, covered in bruises, one eye swelling shut, seeking protection, seeking justice. "Show me," Azure rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. What the Drakkari witnessed that night would fundamentally alter their perception of humanity. They followed Lena back to the colony, 6 dragons moving with predatory silence. They saw the broken shelter, Sarah Gray unconscious in the medical bay with 3 broken ribs and a fractured skull. They tracked Venn's gang to their warehouse hideout and observed through the windows as the men divided their stolen goods. laughing about teaching that bitch a lesson. The mechanical rabbit sat on Ven's desk, a trophy. Drakari society was built on absolute principles: honor, protection of hatchlings, justice for the wronged. These monsters had violated all three. They had struck a mother defending her territory. They had injured a child. They had stolen something precious from one too small to defend herself. In Drakari law, there was only one response, but Azure hesitated. The treaty forbade Drakari intervention in human affairs. To act might risk the fragile peace, might endanger the other humans who had shown respect. Then he looked down at Lena, still clutching his foreclaw with her tiny hand, her face a mask of pain and hope. "Your kind has a saying," Azure said slowly, "about wolves protecting lambs?" The other dragons moved into position. "Tonight," Azure declared, "you learn what happens when you harm a hatchling in a dragon's territory." The warehouse doors exploded inward. Ven's screams were brief. Azure didn't kill them, that would be too quick. Instead, he did something far more devastating to men who valued strength above all. He humiliated them. With surgical precision, his claws shredded their weapons, their supplies, their carefully hoarded power. He held Ven upside down by one ankle, dangling him 50 feet in the air. "You struck a hatchling," Azure's voice boomed across the colony. "You injured her mother. You stole her treasure." Every human in New Haven had emerged from their shelters, watching in awestruck horror. "We Drakari wondered if humans were truly civilized," Azure continued. "We see now that some of you are worse than beasts. Beasts, at least, protect their young." He dropped Ven, not far enough to kill but enough to shatter both legs. "New treaty," Azure announced. "Any human who harms a hatchling, who raises hand against the weak, who steals from those unable to defend themselves, they answer to us." He retrieved the mechanical rabbit with surprising gentleness, his massive claw barely brushing the delicate mechanism. Descending, he placed it in Lena's outstretched hands. "Press the nose," he rumbled gently. Through tears and a swelling face, Lena pressed. Her father's voice echoed across the silent colony. "I love you, little star." Something shifted in Azure's ancient eyes, understanding, recognition. "Your father?" he asked quietly. Lena nodded. "Then this is not a toy," Azure said. "This is a memory keeper. Sacred. In my culture, we carve our lost ones' names in stone that never weathers. You humans, you build machines that speak with voices of the dead." He stood to his full height, addressing the gathered crowd. "This I understand. This I respect." Over the following weeks, the unexpected happened. Drakari began visiting the human settlement, not as overlords, but as protectors. They were drawn to the children especially, fascinated by human hatchlings who showed no fear, who asked endless questions, who drew pictures of dragons that the warriors kept as treasures. Lena recovered, as did her mother. But the little girl who had run crying into dragon territory came back changed. She became the bridge between species, the first human to learn the Drakari language, to understand their customs, to explain human vulnerability and resilience in ways that made sense to beings who valued strength. "We are weak," she told Azure one day, sitting on his fur claw like a living throne. "But we protect each other anyway. That's what makes us strong." Azure, the warrior who had incinerated armies, who had fought in the War of 5 Clans, who had never shown weakness, did something unprecedented. He bowed his head to a 7-year-old girl. "Little hatchling," he said, "you are the bravest warrior I have ever known. You faced dragons to save your mother. You showed us what humanity truly means, not the evil of those men, but your courage. Your love." Years later, when the quantum communicator finally connected with Earth's survivors, the message they sent back would change humanity's future forever. "We are not alone. We are not defenseless. We are protected by dragons who saw a little girl cry and chose honor over indifference. They reminded us what we were supposed to be, not the predators, but the protectors. Not the strong devouring the weak, but the strong defending those who need it most. Send no weapons. Send no warriors. Send teachers. Send healers. Send more children who ask questions and build memory keepers. The dragons are waiting. And they're already teaching us how to be worthy of their protection." In her shelter, Lena Gray pressed the nose of her mechanical rabbit and listened to her father's voice. Azure lay outside, his massive bulk a living wall between her and the night, between vulnerability and violence, between the darkness humans created and the light they could still become. When a little girl cried, the dragons answered. And in answering, they saved more than one child. They saved humanity's soul.